Thank everybody for being here. We have a lot of ground to cover today because there's a lot of important information that we want to share with the public. The first thing I can tell you is we are dealing with one of the most significant icing events that we've had in the state of Texas in at least several decades. And as we will discuss over the course of our presentations today, there are some consequences that result from this being such a significant icing event. The main thing that we want to do today is to continue our efforts to keep the public informed about exactly what is going on about the power grid, about what the state is doing to respond to the winter storm, and what Texans can do to enhance their own safety over the course of the next few days. First, the power grid. The power grid is performing very well at this time. I'm going to be making reference to this graph and this graph at this time. This graph right here shows expected power demand for about the next 24 hours for the remainder of today and early tomorrow. It shows that the power generation capacity that is expected and a breakdown of the source of that power, whether it be wind, solar, or thermal. It shows that there is plenty of power available at this time, as well as plenty of power expected over the remainder of today and early tomorrow. At the expected peak demand, not just tomorrow, but in this entire winter storm event, at the expected peak demand, there should be about 10,000 megawatts of extra power capacity. To put that in context, that is about enough extra power to supply about 2 million homes. The second graph, this one over here, that shows the current demand for power in Texas at this time. That would be the bottom line, which is kind of the teal or green colored line. It also shows the current available capacity of power from the grid at this time, and that's the top line. It shows that there is about a 20,000 megawatts of extra power over current demand. Now, very importantly, even though at this time we have an extraordinary amount of extra supply of power, at this time there are about 70,000 customers in Texas without power. So how can that be that there are people in the state of Texas without power if the grid is fully functioning and has ample power supply? The reason is because of issues with local power providers. The most probable cause of a power outage right now around the state of Texas for anybody who's without power is either because of heavy winds affected lines or more likely because of an icing condition, where ice itself could have brought down power lines, or ice could have weighed down on trees or tree limbs that would have brought down a power line. Anyone out of power at this time should call their local power provider. If you do not know how to get a hold of your local power provider, I'm going to give you a website address that you could use to contact your local power provider. Go to puc.texas.gov/storm. If anybody needs access to try to find the phone number of the power provider to call because your power is out, you can go to puc.texas.gov/storm. Now, to address the down lines, or for whatever reason why local power providers are not able to provide power to your house at this particular time, I want you to know that local power providers are bringing in extra resources to get those power lines back up, and the state of Texas is helping them. There are more than 10,000 linemen already working for power transmission companies to assist with power lines that are not working. And in addition to that, almost 2,000 more linemen are coming in from outside the state of Texas to expedite the repair trucks that are needed that are coming in from outside of the state. I am issuing a proclamation that authorizes the Texas Department of Public Safety to waive some regulations that will allow them, those repair trucks, to get into the state faster and easier. Also, to help local jurisdictions, local governments, rapidly respond with the tools and resources they need, I am at this moment issuing a proclamation for all counties most heavily affected by the ice storm at this particular time. They are listed in this proclamation that I'm about to sign, and they include 17 counties across the state of Texas. So this proclamation is now in effect for those 17 counties, but we know that over the course of the remainder of the winter storm, there may be additional counties that will need to be added because of conditions on the grounds in those counties, in which case we will be supplementing this proclamation to include those additional counties. Now, in addition to the forecast that Urcot and the PUC are relying upon, there are other reasons to provide confidence in the ongoing resiliency of the power grid. One is that, as compared to last year, Texas has about 15% more power generation capacity. There is also more reserve power available than last year. Unlike last year, winterization has been required for power generators, and there's been about 99% of those power generators passed inspection. Last year, some generators were not available because of maintenance operations during the course of the winter storm. This year, more generators are online because they were required to do maintenance either before or after a winter season. Also, more natural gas facilities are designated as critical infrastructure to ensure operation during a winter storm. Last year, less than 100 facilities were designated as critical infrastructure. As of now, more than 2,900 of those facilities are designated as critical infrastructure. Also, unlike last year, some generators that use natural gas also have alternative fuels to generate power in the event they are not receiving the natural gas that they were expecting or needed. Also, if weather limits the flow of natural gas, we have several days of natural gas in storage that can be used. Additionally, the grid is projected to have a surplus of more than 10,000 megawatts for peak power demand tomorrow morning, on Friday morning, which we expect to be the peak of demand for the winter storm. In short, to repeat what the chairman of the PUC has said, the Texas electric grid is the most reliable and resilient that it's ever been. Now, there are more than 24 state agencies that are working 24/7 to help respond to the winter storm. And all of the agencies that are seated at the table will be making presentations about what they are doing. I'm going to cover those, some of those that are not at the table right now. One is the Texas Military Department, which includes the Texas National Guard. They currently have deployed at least 127 personnel and 52 vehicles and will add more as needed. They have 5 winter weather mission-ready packages staged in Abilene, Wichita Falls, Lubbock, Brownwood. That one's going to be moving, I think, to Wiley, as well as in Round Rock. Winter weather packages are comprised of 18 personnel, Humvees, wreckers, and ambulances. TMD also has assigned a military district coordinator to Garland to coordinate Texas military resources in the North Texas region. The Texas Military Department has a battalion of mission command staged in Lubbock, and they have additional resources that can be deployed as needed. As one example, they have been involved in assisting motorists on Interstate 20, mile marker 220, which is near the Abilene area. The Texas A&M Forest Service is currently supporting TxDOT, as well as the Texas Division of Emergency Management, with winter weather response with personnel and equipment assigned to San Angelo, Abilene, Amarillo, Brownwood, and Sherman. Texas Parks and Wildlife They are prepared to support with 4x4 vehicles as well as personnel statewide. Two things about what they're involved in doing in more detail. They have assisted the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Department of Transportation with motorists in the Wichita Falls area. Additionally, they will be announcing later on today that some state parks will be closed for a short period of time as we work our way through the winter storm. But that will be an announcement coming from the Texas Parks and Wildlife later on today. The Texas Animal Health Commission is now activated at the State Operations Center right here and is coordinating with animal response partners at both state and local levels. Currently, they are working on potential hay and feed or other livestock-related support following the storm. All partners have indicated right now no unmet needs, but are working to prepare for anticipated issues. The Texas Animal Health Commission staff remain on standby for response for any animal issues that may arise. The Texas Department of State Health Services is coordinating with hospital preparedness providers on resource needs such as potential power outages, water issues, medical staff surge, or overnight lodging. They have put 3 emergency medical task force severe weather packages into the field, as well as 2 additional ambulances on standby to cover affected regions. Already, they have delivered more than 100 oxygen tanks in the Austin area in the event that they are going to be needed, and stand ready to make deliveries of oxygen tanks to any affected region where there is demand. With that, I am going to turn it over to Peter Lake, the Chair of the Public Utilities Commission.
Thank you, Governor. As expected, we have received reports of local outages from across the state due to icing on power lines and ice weighing down tree branches and trees. We are working closely with transmission companies across the state to ensure they deploy the resources needed to restore power as soon as possible. We have worked with them also to ensure that crews were pre-positioned before the cold weather set in to address these outages as quickly as possible. If you are experiencing a power outage, please report it to your local provider, and please check puc.texas.gov/storm for information about outages in your area and for information about contacting your local provider. I'd like to thank our partners at TxDOT for working closely with these transmission companies to ensure that the necessary roads are cleared so that crews can get to the necessary equipment to restore power as quickly as possible. It's important to understand that these are localized outages that are not related to system-wide reliability issues, as you can see on the screen behind us. The grid remains strong, reliable, and it is performing well in this winter weather event. In addition, we will continue implementing the robust reforms passed in these last few months. Unlike last year, we will be operating the grid in a much more conservative approach with a bigger margin of safety of reserves and an abundance of caution. Most importantly, our generators and power lines are now weatherized to not only meet but exceed federal standards. We have worked closely with our partners at the Railroad Commission to ensure that critical infrastructure on our natural gas supply chain is identified and protected in the event of any emergency situation, that to ensure that they continue to receive power so natural gas continues to flow to our generators. In addition, the market reforms implemented in Urcot are ensuring that our generators have additional fuel on site and accessible, as the Governor mentioned earlier. Unlike in the past, they are able to economically procure this fuel, keep it on site, and be sure they have redundancy in weather events like this. These generators have pre-positioned crews, much like our transmission companies have, so that if there are operational problems at a generator, those can be addressed quickly. We will continue to work with our partners at our fellow state agencies to ensure localized outages are addressed quickly. The grid is strong, is reliable, and is performing well in this winter weather event. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brad Jones, the CEO of Urcot.
Thank you, Governor. As we've indicated in the past, we continue to operate the electric grid in an extremely conservative manner. We are bringing on more resources, having those resources available early, making sure that they're stabilized to continue to provide reliable service to the grid. That goes for our forecast as well. As you see behind us, our forecast has increased since yesterday by about 3,000 megawatts. Similarly, our wind expectations have also increased. The reason for the wind expectations to increase is that we had been forecasting a significant level of icing in the western part of our state. That has not occurred as severely as we expected, and so our wind forecast now is much higher than it was previously. In addition, we've been working on communications throughout the entire industry, talking to each of our industry partners, working with the state, but also working with every part of our industry, generators, transmission distribution providers, to make sure that we are communicating sufficiently and accurately across all of those different forums. We recently contacted the TCEQ yesterday morning to ask for enforcement discretion. I know that the TCEQ will talk about that as well, but that has already been granted. In addition, we have not seen any of our generation come offline for cold weather situation, which is indication that our weatherization program is working as we had hoped. Finally, I would like to again reiterate that we have been operating in an extremely conservative manner. We have a high degree of confidence in our grid. We feel very comfortable in our current situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Commissioner Craddock with the Texas Railroad Commission.
Thank you, Governor. The Railroad Commission has been conducting daily operational calls since Monday with the three major natural gas providers, or your gas utilities, that serve approximately 97% of the residential customers in the state. They don't anticipate any service interruptions to the residential customers, so your gas should stay on, you should have heat, you should be able to cook, and they have additional support crews available if any issues arise. If you have an issue, please call your local provider if you have any outages. Since last fall, the Railroad Commission has conducted over 4,000 weatherization site visits, including 100% of our intrastate underground storage has been inspected. Prior to this event, the natural gas pipelines packed their pipelines and underground storage at near capacity. Operators have transitioned to 24-hour operations and suspended all scheduled maintenance. This morning, we confirmed at our operator briefing with approximately 100 operators, including production and pipelines, that operations are continuing as usual and they are prepared for the current weather conditions. Fluctuations in production are in the normal range. We want to thank TxDOT and the local counties to make sure our roads are continuing to be open and get cleared. We do have some challenges with roadways that are isolated and regional. Mostly the Permian Basin operators, though, are reporting that they are not having problems getting people to sites. Again, we have line pack and storage are in good condition and the gas is flowing.
Thank you very much. Next is Toby Becker, the Executive Director for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
Thank you, Governor. I'll start by just piggybacking off of what Brad said, that yes, we did grant enforcement discretion as of 6 p.m. Last night, but what I'd like to talk about today is water systems. We are monitoring water systems across the state closely. At this point, we have no significant reported issues, and we've not received any notifications of boil water notices related to Winter Storm Landon at this point. However, it's cold outside and water lines freeze when it gets cold outside, so we do expect that we have some frozen pipes across the state. Frozen pipes can lead to line breakage, which can lead to a loss of pressure, which ultimately could lead to a boil water notice, and that's the main reason why we see boil water notices. So there are three things I'd like to ask Texans to do to prepare for this. Number one, I'm encouraging you to closely follow your water provider. They're going to let you know what the status of your system is and whether you're under a boil water notice. Two, if you see a pipe break in the street that's not in your yard or in your house, report it to your provider immediately. It will help them, and it'll help your utility get out there quickly to fix that and keep the pressure up in the system. The next would be if you have a pipe break in your wall or in your yard, so on your side of the meter, go and turn the water off at the street so you don't bleed the pressure out of the utility system. And then finally, we have a link on our website with a video on how to turn your water off. Our website is www.tceq.texas.gov. If you go there to the winter storm landing page, there's a video that'll show you the different ways to turn the water off if you have a line break in your house, and that will help your local utility keep the pressure up. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Next is Mark Williams, the Executive Director for the Texas Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Governor. TxDOT personnel continue to be active statewide with 24-hour operations underway. Our pretreatment efforts have now transitioned into clearing and de-icing work that is going on. Heavy rains impacted the effectiveness of pretreatment in many areas, and heavy icing, as the Governor noted, continues to make the roads very dangerous. We have approximately 2,500 road segments along and generally west of I-35 that are covered with ice and/or snow, and driving conditions remain and continue to be dangerous. We do, in particular, want to point out bridges and overpasses as being locations that motorists need to be aware of as they're approaching. Governor Abbott also noted the assistance that TxDOT has had from a number of the state agencies that are represented here. This has been a team effort, and we do very much appreciate the help and the support that we get and that motorists receive from those agencies along with our personnel. A couple of closures of note. The Metroplex in particular continues to see a heavy amount of snow and freezing precipitation that's ongoing, I think, in those areas. And in some of our other urban areas, our ramps and overpasses in some locations are closed. We've also closed the managed lane system in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in order to help conserve resources and allow our teams to concentrate on the main lanes in those areas. A few other trouble spots of note to just be aware of. Interstate 10 between Ozona and Fort Stockton, we've seen some issues with some of the semi-tractor trailers having trouble getting traction going up some of the hills in that area. And it was also noted Interstate 20 between Abilene and Fort Worth overnight. There were some challenges there, and we still are seeing some potential problem areas that we're responding to and treating. Primary message, too, that we want to get out for motorists: you don't have to be on the roads. Don't get out there and drive. We also want to encourage motorists, along with the media, to refer to our website, drivetexas.org. That's the location where as soon as we have road information and updated road information, we put it on that site so you all can have the best information available. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you very much. Next is the Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, Colonel C. McCraw.
Thank you, Governor. Texas troopers continue to respond to crashes and stranded motorists across the state, certainly with our local partners and TxDOT, Texas Military Department, game wardens, to be able to address those things. Clearly, the most significant factor, I think the Chief can agree with that, is driving too fast for the prevailing conditions. The icy roads, there's no downside, there's no minimum speed enforcement when it comes to icy roads, and there's no reason to be pressured to go any faster than you feel safe when you're on the roadways. And one advisement, based upon some of the things we've observed, is if you're following a TxDOT truck over an overpass, don't try to pass it, okay? Let it de-ice the bridge and the overpasses, okay? Allow them to occur. I know that's a problem in some of the areas, especially in some of the construction areas that we've seen. I would, at the end, also I'd like to remind people, if you are stranded, there is a telephone number you can call. And many people have taken advantage of it over the last 24 hours, Governor. It's 1-800-525-5555, and it's on the back of your driver's license. So please use that. If there's an injury accident, 911. But if you're stranded, please use that number, and someone will be there to help you. Thank you very much.
Very good. Next is Chief Nim Kidd, Head of the Texas Division of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Governor, and I want to continue to thank our local partners that are working all across Texas right now. This morning, we hosted another statewide call with over 1,200 call-in lines from our local partners there. Our mass care teams continue to support local efforts. We have warehouses stocked with food, with water, with MREs, and with blankets. Additionally, over 185 warming centers are open across the state of Texas right now. Big thank you to the local government partners that have opened that up. Another 56 of those warming centers are on standby. And finally, I want to reiterate some of the things that have been set up here and add a little more to it. Our first responders are out there on the streets every day. And right now, they're out there doing everything they can in these dangerous conditions to answer 911 calls. Our hospitals still have our healthcare workers that have traveled there. And so if you do not need to be out traveling right now, do not get out on the streets if you have ice on those road conditions. Finally, we need to remember the people, the pets, the plants, and the pipes. As Director Baker talked about, we will see water pipes and we will see freezing. So do everything you can to limit that damage to your home and keep the system in place. And finally, Governor, the very last thing is, if those first responders that are out there, give them plenty of room to operate. Again, if you don't have to be on the road, do not be on the road.
Very good. Listen, before opening up for questions, I want to take a moment to thank all the men and women in this building, as well as in office buildings across Austin, who are working 24/7 to make sure that the state is doing everything we can to both keep the state safe as well as to address any of the challenges that our fellow Texans are facing. So thank you, everybody here, for working so hard. Wes will take a few questions.
Yes, sir. Bryce, can you go ahead? In terms of the pre-treatment of the roads and trying to get the icing issue, so how much would you say was the effectiveness of the pre-treatment that happened over the last couple of days?
Well, it really kind of depends. It's kind of a localized issue depending upon the amount of rain that we've received. I can say that a lot of the pre-treatment efforts were diminished significantly in some areas because of the heavy rain that served to wash off some of that solution that was put down. Nevertheless, I think there's still some areas where we've seen some benefit from those efforts, but the icing as well is really an important point of emphasis to us. That makes the roads very dangerous, even with the pre-treatment that we put on.
Fox 7, go ahead. Fred, CBS.
Governor, you mentioned waiving some rules for the EPS to get the line crews. What kinds of rules are they? Would they compromise anything?
They should not, because the director of DPS is the one in charge of that. I'm going to have him answer specifically what they do, what the waiver does.
Yes, sir. It's Part 395 of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. It's to support this ICE event. This includes, but it's not limited to, power grids, repairs, and delivery of groceries, fuel, propane, not unlike we did before in the last ice storm or other conditions in that regard. It doesn't compromise safety in the sense of if a vehicle's out of service, they remain out of service. They don't get the back-end service just because of this waiver. The governor doesn't compromise any of the particular safety protocols, but it does allow for some restrictions to be removed so we can get the people into the area that needs to be addressed.
One restriction that I think it expands upon, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it removes a limitation on the hours of operation. Yes, to make sure that they don't drive here from some other state and get close to where they need to be, only to have to stop operating to go the last 50 miles or something like that. We want to make sure they're able to get to the destination they need to get to provide the assistance that's needed.
Commissioner Craddock, have you had any reports of failures of gas production facilities in the field, Permian Basin? What have you been alerted to, anything at all?
The fluctuations really are within the normal ranges, and we are talking to operators all over the state to make sure gas continues to flow.
Does that mean you were aware of the Oxy US plant in Crane going down, freezing up this morning, and emitting about 1,600 pounds of sulfur dioxide?
The emissions, I think, would go to TCEQ, so I don't know if he's aware of the emissions piece. We are aware that there are some operators in the field having some challenges, but they're working through those challenges as we speak.
And how much of a concern is that?
Again, the gas is flowing, so I don't think that that any challenges we see in the field are affecting what's going on across the state. Again, that will be a TCEQ question because I think that that's a report that they give to TCEQ, so they'll continue to follow up with that.
Last question, Monica, go ahead.
The peak demand was projected to be around 71,000 megawatts on Tuesday. Now, of course, that's risen to 75, and the reserve power supply has dropped. Why the sudden change in the forecast hasn't changed?
Just like any forecast in weather, they evolve and become more fine-tuned and more accurate as we get closer to the operating day. Urcot is simply refining and improving their forecast the closer we get to the operating day. As always, we have a wide range of tools available to provide an additional margin of safety. But at this point, we see a very comfortable amount of excess megawatts and excess capacity.
Very good. Thank you all.